Can the Kansas City Chiefs make history as the first team to ever three-peat in NFL history, or could the Philadelphia Eagles be on the verge of starting their own dynasty? A Super Bowl edition of Crossover Thursday coming your way right here on Locked On Eagles and Locked On Chiefs.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles and Locked On Chiefs your first listen each and every day. I'm Louie DiBase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. We've got Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy joining us of the Locked On Chiefs podcast. In this special Super Bowl edition of Crossover Thursday is, as always, presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Gentlemen, welcome back to a Super Bowl preview between the Eagles and Chiefs twice in 3 years. I really didn't expect this again, and I think it's more from the, not to discredit what the Eagles have done this year because it was an incredible run, but after last year's collapse, I really didn't think that we'd be doing this just 1 year later. But that is where we're at. Eagles, Chiefs, second time in 3 years, and of course the biggest storyline of this game is Kansas City is trying to make history and Philadelphia's trying to stop it as they could be the first team to ever three-peat. Chris, I want to start with you. When it comes to Kansas City and maybe the pressure of that, like Pat Mahomes at the parade last year was already talking about a three-peat. How much do you think that's weighing on them, even though they already have 3 rings? Like, where does that kind of impact the team? Because it's, of course, a national media narrative that everybody's pushing, but how much is the team thinking about that right now?
I think they're probably thinking about it a little bit, but I don't think it's going to really give them any pressure. I think when you look at their season this year and how they played, and every single game, well, just about every single game being close, one-score games, never scoring over 32 points or never scoring over 32 points in a game, and that was in the playoffs against the Bills. They have seemingly struggled by media standards the entire season. And to be back in the Super Bowl, knowing that all they got to do is win one more game, they have to show up, they have to win one game. And the nice thing for the Chiefs, and the thing that benefits them the most, is yes, they have Patrick Mahomes, who's the best player in the NFL, but they also have a roster of probably 30 to 40 guys that know what this experience is like. They've been here before. They have 2 rosters. They have 2 draft classes full of guys that have played in nothing but Super Bowls, and getting ready to add a third at this point.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think it's interesting because it's almost like a battle of opposing philosophies. Not that the Eagles can't throw the football and not that the Chiefs can't run it or play good defense, but Kansas City's dynasty has been carried by, and again, their rosters have been very good even though they're ever changing, but it's the Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid dynasty, very similar to what New England did with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, whereas Philadelphia, yeah, it's Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni getting to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, but this team has been carried more off the backs of Saquon Barkley's historic year. A run-first team making it to the championship rarely happens, and of course, they were also the number 1 defense in football, so it's kind of interesting that both teams are complete and can do it all, but it is kind of a battle of opposing strengths. Like, the Chiefs are led by a quarterback and head coach, which is what you normally think it takes for an NFL team to be a consistent title contender, and Philly's kind of doing it a different way this year.
It's throwback, honestly, and if you're somebody who grew up like I did wanting what this is, the Eagles are doing more of what I would do if I was running this team, right? Because I don't have faith in just one guy, except he's an alien. Yeah. If it's not Patrick Mahomes, I don't know that I could buy into the whole process, but it is complete juxtaposition. And I would even argue a step further. When you say on the back of Saquon, I would say it's on the back of Lane Johnson or Mailata. That's how you get this done, because I think the modern NFL is more towards the Chiefs side, a little bit more finesse offensive line. The power doesn't come through. But if you're going to run the ball like you can here with this group and you're going to play defense, that's right up my alley. And while it will hurt to watch them go down, I do think that I will enjoy the way that they play the game.
And it's funny, I talked to Lane Johnson at Media Day New Orleans on Monday night, and he talked about how that meeting after the bye week, when they were 2-2 and still throwing it 30-plus times, and it felt very 2023-esque, that meeting where he, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata sat down with Nick Sirianni and said, hey, we need to run the football more. We need to feature Saquon Barkley. And then suddenly they became the team that ran more in the NFL than anybody. It led to a 10-game win streak, which was a franchise record. They did not get the 1 seed, yet still made it to the Super Bowl. Like, that moment was a defining one for this team, and it could alter the course of the franchise's history. So it's kind of fascinating that most of the time the NFL says, hey, you're supposed to go in the opposite direction, and Philly said, no, that's not working. We need to kind of go back to the old school approach, and it worked. So I think it's really interesting. But I will say, another storyline for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to really cement himself as a true elite quarterback. And yeah, there were times this year he had up and down performances as a passing quarterback, but I really do think he's elite in a different way, more of a Russell Wilson, a Cam Newton. Yeah, it's not the same as a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen or even a Pat Mahomes, but if he gets a ring, and he's been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. He had one of the best Super Bowl performances I've ever seen 2 years ago. His playoff win percentage is up there with the all-time greats. Yeah, again, you might still not put him ahead of, you're not going to put him ahead of Mahomes, maybe not even Burrow, Lamar, or Allen, but I don't know how you can debate anymore that he's in that top tier. At least that's in my opinion if he wins this game. Chris, what do you think about that, at least from a quarterback perspective when it comes to the storylines in this game?
Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes last year, or 2 years ago when they played in the Super Bowl. Quite simply, he outplayed him. Don't get me wrong, Mahomes made plays when it mattered, and he got his team to where they could win the game. But Jalen Hurts outplayed Mahomes, I'll say 95% of the game. Mahomes did it when it mattered most. That's really what it comes down to. And it's almost always what it comes down to with him.
Yeah.
I do think that Hurts is in a conversation of being one of those top tier quarterbacks. But it is a question of, can he get over the hump? Can he get a Super Bowl ring? And this is his opportunity to go out and beat. And I know QBs don't play each other, but to go out and beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it matters.
And that says something.
Ryan, is there another, of course, the three-peat is just, everywhere with the Kansas City storylines, but is there another key thing in this game that we should have eyes on outside of them making history with that 3 straight?
It's really the fact that it is not just the offense. This, again, like last season, is a balanced team that had to do it together because you don't have everything that you wanted on offense. It's been, honestly, a season of attrition. They've tried, I don't know how many combinations of getting this player to do that and drafting this player to do that, where they just had to keep reinventing this team. And it has to happen on both sides of the ball. And it really is, I think, one thing that we can sit back and win, lose, or draw this particular Super Bowl, you can say this is an entire team going towards that three-peat chance together as a unit. And I think that's something special.
There's a lot of great matchups in this game. It's going to be a good one. There's a reason these two teams have now faced off in the final game of the season twice in the last 3 years. Pat Mahomes against Jalen Hurts, Kellen Moore against Steve Spagnuolo. There's so many matchups we'll get into on a Super Bowl edition of Crossover Thursday. Locked on Eagles and Locked on Chiefs. This crossover edition of Locked on Eagles and Locked on Chiefs is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. The app is super easy to navigate, plus knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, in my opinion, take the anytime rushing touchdown for Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley. That always hits. If you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. We thank you so much for making Locked on Eagles and Locked on Chiefs your first listen each and every day. Louie DiBase joined by Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy. Super Bowl 59, less than a week away this Sunday at the Superdome. And guys, where do we even begin with the matchups? Obviously, we already kind of hinted that the quarterbacks, it's always about the quarterbacks in this big game. Jalen Hurts against Pat Mahomes. One of the best shootouts in Super Bowl history 2 years ago, going toe-to-toe. Both teams scored over 35 points. It honestly came down to who had the ball last, and that, of course, was Pat Mahomes. And I feel like that's kind of a consistent theme with Kansas City's dynasty. But is there another matchup, and Ryan, we'll start with you, maybe let's start like with Kansas City's offense or wherever you want to go with this. Like, what's the other big time matchup that doesn't have to do with the obvious most important position at quarterback?
And everybody wants to go to that matchup and how you get pressure on Mahomes. But I think the opposite is true. It's how do you attack the injured interior of the Eagles' offensive line? I don't want to take anything away from the tackles, but the interior three, you got to put your effort there. A, to take away the easy yards straight up the gut for Saquon, and B, to make them get out of that easy, get the ball out kind of passing that I think Jalen actually thrives in. So get him off of his tempo, get pressure in his face, attack the A-gaps. That's job number one here. And I think as much as the left tackle for the Chiefs is probably a question mark, what the pass rush the Chiefs can do against the interior of the Eagles offensive line, I think is just as much up for question.
Ryan, it's interesting. I think with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, I'm really watching the matchup against Spags' defense. And you mentioned pressure because Jalen throughout his career, it's kind of a high variance. Sometimes he carves up defenses that send pressure, disguise looks, especially man blitzes. At times, if he can escape and the one-on-ones are there with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, they can have success. I think they did that against the Commanders in the NFC Championship. But then there's times where if you throw a lot of zone blitzes at him and he starts to panic, after his first read, he's not seeing the field well. Then he starts to try to play hero ball with his legs, actually. He drops his eyes, and that's where he can get into trouble. I think you saw that in the playoffs last year against Tampa Bay. So I am really curious how the Eagles are going to answer and counter what Spags does on defense. I am curious, like when they send pressure, do you think it's going to be more based on man looks, based on zone? I feel like it will differ a lot, but I think that's going to be a really interesting kind of chess part of this, about this matchup.
If I know Spags at all, the only thing I can answer is yes.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever you think isn't coming is.
Yeah.
And that, I think that variation is exactly the game plan, because you have to respect what Saquon's going to do. So you have to take your hits when you can at just attacking in crazy ways, which he knows more than any of us will ever forget.
And I think Kellen Moore has got to give Jalen Hurts quicker answers. There's been times this year that the passing concept, they just take way too long to develop. Devontae Smith in the slot's going to be a key. Dallas Goedert as well has been incredible in the playoffs. So the quick passing game for Philly, it was a lot better against Washington than it was against LA and Green Bay. That's got to be something that stays consistent against Kansas City. Chris, you were kind of alluding to this even before the show. When you flip the field, Pat Mahomes, the Chiefs offense against the Eagles' number one ranked defense, Jalen Carter is the alpha of that unit on the interior. How do the Chiefs try to stop number 98? Like, who's playing guard for them? Is there still a question about who's at left tackle? What are they doing up front?
There is a question of who's going to be playing left tackle and who's going to be playing left guard. It could be Joe Thuney playing left guard. It could be Joe Thuney playing left tackle. We will find out, unfortunately, probably not until they're taking the field and getting ready in warmups.
Crazy for a Super Bowl that we got that kind of unknown.
It is crazy, but it's what they've been doing the past couple of weeks. I mean, Joe Thuney has been the guy that they've gone with, and if you look at it from the perspective of the Eagles pass rush, it would make sense that it would be okay for the Chiefs to have a guy at left tackle that maybe isn't a normal left tackle and can just keep people off Mahomes. So I think that they will probably go with Joe Thuney. That would be my guess. But the bigger problem that is going to create is it gives you a guy in Mike Caliendo that is going to be hugely overmatched going against Jalen Carter. And to me, if I'm Kansas City, I would rather have Joe Thuney in there going against Jalen Carter, because I think it's a better matchup for the Chiefs in the interior. And not saying that the Eagles can't get after the quarterback from the outside, but the interior pass rush of the Eagles is a lot scarier to me than the defensive ends getting after Patrick Mahomes. One other quick thing, really quick, because you guys talked about it already. Jalen Hurts has really struggled this year when he's under pressure. That is going to be a huge key, and I'm going to be very curious to see how Spags sends pressure against him this coming Sunday.
And we talked about that, and Kellen Moore against Spags, like that kind of battle with the pressure versus the quick passing game. I think something that's going to be interesting on the other side, though, is Andy Reid versus Vic Fangio, right? Vic Fangio has taken the youngest defense in football. Most of these starters are under the age of 27, 26, a lot of rookies and second-year players from their top two drafts over the last few years, the top two rounds. Howie Roseman, the Eagles general manager, has invested a lot in the defense. Fangio has taken that defense from number 26 overall last year to number 1. I think the big matchup, of course, like Jalen Carter on the inside's got to take over this game, but also how do you stop Travis Kelce? And Kelce this year, is he who he was, 3 to 4 years ago? No, but he's still big time in money situations. Got to have it third downs in the red zone. When Pat Mahomes gets outside the numbers, outside of structure, when the play breaks down, he looks for number 87. I am right. I'm very curious how the Eagles are going to try to attack Travis Kelce, because the game plan in 2022 was awful. It just felt like Jonathan Gannon did not have any idea how to stop 87.
I don't know that there is a way to stop him. And that's the thing, is I think you have to have ABC. You have to have multiple plans, because Bonds had a great season, right? Are you going to stick him on Kelce one-on-one? Never tried to cover him.
I think that's the move. Yeah.
Right. No. So what do you do next? What do you do next? And what do you do next? Because here's the thing, and you said it perfectly. Patrick will look for him. He doesn't have to look for him. Half the time they're throwing passes blind because they know where the other's going to be. And so that removes some of that element, and the timing is just so clean that you have to make sure that whatever your plan is, that you're executing it 100%.
I think you look at Chris, the Eagles secondary, they play a lot of zone heavy coverages. And I think one thing that you have to do against Travis Kelce, because a lot of times he's not even running routes. Ryan, as you mentioned, I mean, he just has so much chemistry with Pat Mahomes that he's just finding the soft spot in the zone. You can't pass him off to nobody, right? You have to be in constant communication. You got to know where he is on the field. Just because you're playing zone coverage doesn't mean you don't have to move around. And I think that's something the Eagles have to do, is their eyes, the eye placement and coverage is going to be really important against Travis. So I think that's going to be really important.
The thing that really stands out to me, though, that is different than the last time the Chiefs played this Eagles team in the Super Bowl, is Kansas City has probably 3 or 4 options that I'm not going to say they're on the same level as Kelce, but DeAndre Hopkins is somebody that Patrick Mahomes trusts implicitly. You've seen it in multiple different times this season where he's thrown the ball where he wouldn't give other wide receivers the opportunity to do it. I think he kind of has that relationship with Juju as well. And I don't think that they're quite there with Marquise Brown yet, or Hollywood Brown, but I think it's getting close. And I do think that he trusts Brown, and that was something that they were working on in the offseason, trying to get him ready and trying to make him a big part of this offense, which would have changed the way that this offense operated and looked all season long. So I do think that this is a little bit different. Yeah, you have to worry about Travis Kelce, but you also have guys that maybe they're not going to be home run hitters specifically, because I'm not talking about Xavier Worthy, although he trusts him too, but you have guys that can do just enough to get the first downs and keep the sticks moving, which is what this Chiefs offense is all about.
Yeah, it is kind of a fun battle between trios at receiver and corner, because the Eagles this time around, I think also, though, are much better equipped to handle the Chiefs' speed and youth infusion at wide receiver. Of course, with Hollywood Brown, with Xavier Worthy, DeAndre Hopkins, not who he used to be, but could still win the 50-50 balls, still effective in the red zone. The Eagles do have Quinyon Mitchell this time around, Cooper DeJean, Darius Slay kind of having a rejuvenated season at age 34, and then at safety, Reed Blankenship and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are an underrated duo. So it's going to be kind of a fun back-and-forth chess match on that side of the ball. And Ryan, when you look at Xavier Worthy, he's been very good down the stretch, the second half of the year in the playoffs. That's kind of the X factor I'm watching. Like, how is Andy Reid going to use him in a creative way? The Eagles are better than any defense at stopping explosive plays, but I wonder if they're going to be like, let's try to get him in the slot, maybe use him pre-snap motion. Can we get him over the middle against a linebacker like Oren Burks? That's kind of the weak link in the Eagles' coverage on defense. I am interested kind of what the game plan will be with Worthy. Again, two great rookies on both sides on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think for Burks, he's got to hope that he doesn't have a nightmare flashback to last time, because it was a very difficult game. And here's the thing: is it's not just that he is now the twinkling little star. He's the eye candy. Come look at me. This is what I'm going to do. And they're going to run him behind the line of scrimmage. They're going to do everything with him. He's actually better downfield in the last 8 weeks than we ever expected him to get in this offense, because he's been forced into a role where he had to actually develop. I think you're going to see some orbit motion that's going to throw things off. I think you will get some matchups there, but it's really about crossing the formations, really stressing the safeties, in my opinion, is what he can do horizontally. We know he has the top end speed, but so does Hollywood. And we know that he can run the out, but so can Hot. So now that they have really a full-fledged passing attack here that they can go anywhere, I think he is the guy that he's going to get the attention, because he should, given the last few games. But in the end, it's the counterpunch that's going to be more deadly.
There's so many angles to take with this matchup, and there's a reason both of these teams are in the Super Bowl. There's very little holes on offense and defense to exploit, but there are a bunch of keys to victory for both teams to win a championship. We'll get into that coming up next. Crossover Thursday right here on Locked On Eagles and Locked On Chiefs. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Chiefs is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of your life you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOn for 10% off your first month of online therapy. All right, Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl 59 set for this Sunday at the Superdome. Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs joining me, Louie DiBase of Locked On Eagles. Guys, what are the keys? If there are three, and there's a lot more than three keys for a win on either side of the ball, but if there were three main things the Chiefs have to do to get the three-peat, we'll start with Chris. What are those three things Kansas City has to do?
They got to get pressure on Jalen Hurts. To me, that is probably key number one. If they can get pressure on Jalen Hurts and they can slow down the passing attack and they can make him make mistakes, that opens things up for the rest of the Chiefs defense to be able to slow things down. Number two to me, obviously, is going to be slowing down Saquon Barkley. I don't think you're going to stop him, but the Chiefs have been pretty good against the run this year. They haven't been fantastic, but they've been good enough. And that is a huge key in this game to me. And then obviously, as I've said all season, it's don't turn the ball over. Patrick Mahomes has been fantastic for the most part in the playoffs, other than that one fumble that looked more like a high school type fumble to me against the Bills than anything else. If they don't turn the ball over, this is a really hard team to beat.
Ryan, is there anything different from those three keys you think Kansas City has to add to get this win?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to get there. First, you have to sustain your drives on offense. We're always looking for the big play. So is Pat Mahomes. But if he doesn't have it, it's got to be about ball control, making sure that you're running the offense. The RPO should be back in this game plan, and it should be something to be quick hitting. Then you have to do the obvious and not give the ball away. Patrick's been very good in particular. The team as a whole has as well about holding possession and not giving it back and making it easy for the opposition. They have to maintain that as well. And the last thing is, at the end of the day, you have to adjust. You're probably going to see something on one side of the ball or the other that you're not expecting, that you haven't game planned for. This staff in particular is very good at making adjustments. The team has grown accustomed to making adjustments, being variable. You have to ride that all the way to the end.
I think for the Eagles to get a Super Bowl win, second one in 8 seasons, and stop another dynasty from getting 3 rings. They actually did it when they beat the Patriots in 2018 because New England had one in 2016, and then I should say 2017, then they won it again in 2018. So this could be the second time they take a team down from winning 3 straight in the biggest stage. I think they're going to have to, number one, they have to be explosive and aggressive, especially in the first half. Like, you cannot play and get coach scared like they did, I think, in Super Bowl 59, the difference, or 57. The reason they won in 2017 and lost in 2022 against a great historic quarterback and head coach was the coaching wasn't I think the game plan wasn't as aggressive, especially in the second half, as it was against New England in 2017. So I want to see them be explosive and aggressive, especially early on. Building a lead is going to be really important for this team. I think Philadelphia is a much better team that plays from the front, where they can then control. My number 2 key is control time of possession. I think those two things go hand in hand. Then you can let Saquon Barkley take over this game. The best way to stop Pat Mahomes, I think, is to keep Pat Mahomes off the football field. If you can have those, back in the December game against Pittsburgh, they have a 10-minute drive in the fourth quarter where they drove the length of the field and just ran it down the Steelers' throats. If you can get a lead, make the Chiefs play from behind, you can then pin your ears back, lean on Saquon Barkley in the offensive line. I think that's another key. And look, I even if the Eagles are explosive and they get a lead in the first half, guys, that happened 2 years ago as well. And Pat Mahomes overcame a double-digit lead to eventually win that football game. So I think it's going to be close, and it's going to be down to the wire. It might come down to who has the ball last, just like it did last time. If that's the case, you have to be special and got to have it moments, especially on defense in the fourth quarter. Like, yeah, I'm not expecting, even though the Eagles were the number one defense in football this year, I'm not expecting them to completely shut down Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like, nobody does. But in those got to have it moments, like Super Bowl 52, the end of the game, Brandon Graham strip sacks Tom Brady. You got to make the play. The red zone stops in the first half against New England, like holding them to field goals. Those crucial situations in the red zone, 3rd and 4th down, late in the fourth quarter. Like, I just think that's so important because when you guys agree, I mean, the Chiefs are maybe I don't know if I've seen a better fourth quarter team or a team in one possession games, and the stats show that. I mean, history proves that.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's a huge key in this is that if it is a close game, Kansas City's played nothing but this entire season. And this is exactly what they're built for. They're not built to blow out teams. Andy Reid isn't built to blow out teams. He doesn't blow out teams, which is to the chagrin of both Ryan and I, who would appreciate some easier games.
A lot less stressful.
Yeah. So to me, that would play into Kansas City's favor if it's a close game down late because they know that they can do it. They've done it before, and it's nothing that they haven't done already.
Right. Is there anything like specifically they do in the fourth quarter that because it just feels like it's always different every time against the Chiefs or against the Bills? It's stopping what normally seems like an automatic play, like QB sneaks, right? And then against Denver, it's blocking a field goal. So I'm always trying to like pinpoint what it is this team does so great in one possession games. And obviously, you can point to Pat Mahomes being special and Travis Kelce, but I don't know. At the same time, it's like it always looks different, and yet they always get the job done.
It's not what they do. It's what they don't do. Because as you said, you never know where it's coming. They don't panic. Yeah. They don't forget that they've been here before. They don't forget that they have the ultimate faith in their quarterback. So the defense will rise up and make extreme plays when they have to because they know if they just get it back in his hands, you have a fighting chance no matter what the score is. So it's that calm under pressure. It's the eye of the storm. It's what they don't do in panicking that gets them through most of these games.
Yeah,
as our friend Therese Paylor would say, Pat Mahomes always brings out is his over my dead body type games. That's exactly what happens. And rest in peace, Therese Paylor. But that's why they're able to do what they do.
And I think Jalen Hurts is going to have to be as special as he was in Super Bowl 57 to get the job done. It's going to be a great game. Eagles-Chiefs set this Sunday for Super Bowl 59 at the Superdome. But Locked On Eagles, Locked On Chiefs, we got you covered still for another Friday show as well. Until then, that's going to do it. Thanks as always for making us your first listen each and every day. For Ryan Tracy and Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, I'm Louie DiBase of Locked On Eagles. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks as always for making us your first listen.